So, welcome back to today's episode. Today we continue with our series of the tree series. So, with this article, I'm going to scroll back to the beginning. Waldbäume, die wichtigsten Baumarten in Deutschland, where we cover these, I think, what was it, like 10 or 15 most important trees that are native to Germany. And we have arrived in the last episode, we did that one, and so we have arrived at that one. There are only, I think, 3 or so left. Yeah, I think maybe we're gonna do that in the end. Or maybe not because it's not a tree, but yeah. So, let's continue and yeah, enjoy, have fun, learn something. As always, I'm gonna explain the sentences word by word. And of course in the sentence structure, so the English words in the German sentence structure, and then the context translation so that you understand what it really means. So, let's start. Eschen und Ulmen, this is the title of this section of this article, which means, I'm not actually quite sure, I think this means ash or something. Ash trees, ash and elm trees, yeah. So, this article section is about the ash and elm trees, and yeah, let's read this subtitle, like caption of this photo. Achtet man auf die tiefschwarzen Knospen der Esche, kann man sie unabhängig ihrer auffälligen Blattformen das ganze Jahr über gut von anderen Bäumen unterscheiden. Achtet man auf die tiefschwarzen Knospen der Esche. Achtet, this not to be confused with the number 8, which means 8. Achtet, this means to basically like keep an eye on, notice. In this case it means notice. So achtet man means notice as 1. This basically translates to 1 in English, not to the number 1, because man originally derives from the word Mann, I guess, which just means man. So achtet man means if one takes notice of this and that. So achtet man auf, if one takes notice of this and that. So I think Google probably is going to say something more colloquial, but this just means that. If you pay attention to, yeah, so achtet man auf, if one takes notice, if one takes notice of, auf in this case really means like off or on top, but in general it means off or on top, but in this case it means off, so take notice of. Die tiefschwarzen Knospen der Esche, the deep black, so tief means deep, schwarz means black, tiefschwarzen, this is plural, so deep black, plural form. Knospen, which means the, is it called blossoms? I'm not quite sure, no. Blossoms or something else, probably. Buds, yeah. So the parts from where these, I think they are called blossoms or something. Blüten. Where the flowers, or yeah, where these blossoming parts come out. So flowers, basically. Deep black. Buds of the elm tree, no, not elm tree, this is ash tree. So if one takes notice on the, of the, but this, you could also say on, because this means on but not in English. So if one takes notice of the deep black buds of the ash tree, I always confuse the two, kann man sie unabhängig ihrer auffälligen Blattformen das ganze Jahr über gut von anderen Bäumen unterscheiden. Can one, again we have this man, which is basically like pronounced the same way that the other man is, but it has a different meaning. Can on, sie, she, because Esche is feminine, so it's a she, but in English you will of course say it. So can one, she, or it, unabhängig, independently, that derives from the word hängen, which means to hang, abhängen, which means to hang down from something. Basically, for example, this leaf here, es hängt von dem Baum, you would say herab, but You could say also ab, es hängt von dem Baum ab, but this es hängt von dem Baum ab has a different meaning, which is to depend on something. So abhängen quite literally means to hang down from something or on something. I don't know. I think you get what I mean. So this means to depend in general and not to hang down from something or off something. And yeah. So independently, unabhängig, is, in English it's also a common prefix, which denies the next meaning or like reverses it. So independently, ihrer, of her, auffälligen, which means, this derives from the word fallen, which means to fall. Fällig, fällig has a different meaning. This can either mean that something is due, like a tax payment or something, or quite literally something falling. I think it probably derives from trees, that a tree is fällig, so ein Baum ist fällig, maybe something, so that it can be, this is another way of probably getting it, like deriving it, because there's also this word fällen, which is basically almost the same word, just with these 2 dots on top of the A, so it becomes an E, which means to fell or to cut down a tree. So auffällig does not have to like a lot to do with felling or fällen im Deutschen, in German. So but you could also derive that from the word fällen, and that just means to cut down. So fällig is also probably due, like a tree due to cut down, and this is probably where this came from. I don't know, I'm just guessing, but trying to derive this word. And so auffällig, probably maybe you could derive it from like due and I don't know, something, but this just means to be very noticeable or characteristic. Auffälligen, which is a different case. Noticeable, these kinds of things. Blattform, leaf, shape or form, but in English you would say shape. Das ganze Jahr, the entire year, ganze, entire, whole, Jahr, year. Das of course means that. Über, so this über can probably be a bit confusing to some learners, but in general that means, or that belongs to this das ganze Jahr über. So you can probably also just not have written it and you would understand it, because kann man sie unabhängig ihrer auffälligen Blattform das ganze Jahr gut von anderen Bäumen unterscheiden. You could also say that, but with das ganze Jahr über, this just gives it a slightly different meaning and is more, I don't know, used or more colloquial or something. I don't know, but this is probably more used and maybe a bit more correct, but I think you just have to learn that this is some sort of an expression. I can't necessarily explain why this is, but probably das ganze Jahr über, like covering the entire year. Über means over, so I don't know. This is just some sort of an expression. So, gut means good, in this case well, because it's doing something. Von, from, of, anderen, other, Bäumen, trees, unterscheiden, differentiate. Unter means under, scheiden means in general divorce, like to divorce someone or to get a divorce, or just to separate something. I think I explained in the last episode also that there are some gold manufacturing, some sort of like places, and they are called in German Scheidestätten. Also the female parts, like the female, I would say genitals, are also called Scheide in German, so unterscheiden, because it's also something that is separating, two sides. not to get too deep into that. But yeah, so unterscheiden means to differentiate. And yeah, so achtet man auf die tiefschwarzen Knospen der Esche, kann man sie unabhängig ihrer auffälligen Blattform das ganze Jahr über gut von anderen Bäumen unterscheiden. If one notices or takes notice of the deep black buds of the ash tree, one or can one them independently of her characteristic, or what was it again? Noticeable, I think. Conspicuous. Yeah, but noticeable, I think it was. Her noticeable leaf shape the entire year over good or well from other trees differentiate. So that just means, to let Google have a go at it. If you look for the deep black buds of the ash tree, you can easily distinguish it from other trees all year around, regardless of its striking leaf shape. So, Eschen und Ulmen, ash trees and elm trees. Die gemeine Esche und die 3 heimischen Ulmenarten, Bergulme, Feldulme und Flatterulme, haben viele Gemeinsamkeiten. So bevorzugen sie Standorte, die gut mit Wasser und Nährstoffen versorgt sind, zum Beispiel entlang großer Flüsse, wo sie häufig in nährstoffreichen Auenwäldern zusammen mit Stieleichen, Weiden, Pappeln, Erlen und vielen anderen Baum- und Straucharten wachsen. Sie sind auch an saisonale Überschwemmungen angepasst. Außerdem haben sie ein außergewöhnliches Holz, das bei entsprechender Qualität hohe Preise erzielen kann. Leider haben sie auch eine weitere Gemeinsamkeit. Sie werden von Pilzarten heimgesucht, die aus Südostasien eingeschleppt wurden. Es ist sogar die Rede von Ulmen und Eschensterben. Solange keine unempfindlichen Exemplare gehandelt werden, sollte man von einer Pflanzung dieser Baumarten absehen. Wenn Sie in Ihrem Wald aber vitale Eschen oder Ulmen haben, sollten Sie diese möglichst schonen und erhalten. Vielleicht bildet sich ja in Ihrem Wald eine Resistenz gegen die Pilzkrankheiten, welche zum Erhalt einer dieser Baumarten beitragen kann. And here is a dot missing. So, Eschen und Ulmen, ash trees and elm trees of course. Die gemeine Esche und die 3 heimischen Ulmenarten, Bergulme, Feldulme und Flatterulme, haben viele Gemeinsamkeiten. Die gemeine Esche, the common ash tree, also can mean the mean ash tree, like in terms of behavior, but this means the common ash tree. Und die 3 heimischen Ulmenarten, and the 3 heimischen, this derives from the word heim, which means home, basically. Also, I think I explained that thoroughly or something in the last 1 or 2 episodes, so I've probably explained that 1 or 2 times. And you can watch that if you want a more thorough explanation on that. But that just means home, you could say, so native. Ulmenarten, which means elm tree species. Bergulme, which means mountain elm, probably something else in English, because they always have different translation of that. Translations. Mountain elm, Feldulme, field elm. Yeah, of course, this time is the exact same. European white elm, so here an example was different. So, yeah, and I pulled up some pictures of them. Flatterulme, which is the last one, is this. I'm gonna have a look at some pictures. They usually have this leaf shape, I think, a very kind of distinguishable because it has this, I don't know what it's called, like this uncarved area, you could say, where it kind of looks a bit degenerated, you could say, but yeah. And here, of course, you have a comparison. The Flatterulme, so what was a European white elm. Then we have the field elm, which seems to have a little smaller leaves, and the mountain elm, which has these probably very characteristic what do you call them? Like these tips, like, yeah, Spitzen. Yeah, these peaks, you could say. Blattspitzen. So yeah, leaf tips, which are very characteristic, I would say. And yeah, so this is the Zur Ulme, so the European, what was it again? European white elm or something? Yeah, European white elm. And this is the Ulme, which has these characteristic, these kinds of, I don't even know what they're called, buds, I think, probably you would also call them, but they're building, like they're trying to produce leaves, I don't know, something like that. And interestingly, they seem to have these kinds of, I think they are maybe really the buds, and yeah, seem to produce these kinds of seeds. Yeah, this is, I think I probably have seen this kind of bark 100 times in Germany, and it's very common. So let me see what kind of bark this has. Yeah, it just always kind of looks like, I mean, not directly like oak tree, but similar. I mean, I know it's a different kind of tree species, but just from close up, of course, here you can see it's not exactly oak, but yeah. Yeah, this I also have seen probably 100 times in Germany. I mean, maybe not too many, but just from afar it looked very familiar to me. But when I look close, it kind of looks different to what I thought it was. But these kinds of leaves, very, very common. And yeah. So that was the Zur Ulme, the European white elm, the Ulme we just also briefly. Yeah, this is what I mean. This, I think, wasn't it also from maple trees, these kinds of things I've seen, I'm not quite sure, but these things, at least in bigger, I have seen like dozens of times, like hundreds of times, I can't even count them, so many times in Germany. I mean, probably depends on where you live, but very, very often seen there. What I just meant was very, I think, kind of familiar to me are these sorts of seeds, I think. When they turn brown and they just like lie on the ground, I think I've seen that like also hundreds of times in Germany, so maybe that was very common to me or familiar. And then we have the mountain elm, which has these sorts of leaves with these two extra tips, you could say. Maybe I've also seen it a couple of times, but these leaves do seem a bit like very extravagant, I don't know how to pronounce it to me, but like very kind of special. And yeah, here you can kind of see what I meant when these turn brown. I think I've seen them in maybe smaller forms a lot of times on the ground. But yeah, and these are, yeah, this is just pure German tree, basically, if I can call it that way. I've seen that like so many times. I mean, I'm not quite sure if this is the only tree that has these kinds of, like this distinct shape of buds or whatever growing there, but this just seems so common to me, or familiar. And yeah, this is just, yeah, Germany, you could say. And also this bark, yeah, seen 100 times. So, let's continue. Bergulme, mountain elm, Feldulme, field elm and European white elm haben viele Gemeinsamkeiten. Have many Gemeinsamkeiten. Gemeinsam means together. Gemein, we also have that, means mean or common. And Gemeinsamkeiten means things in common, basically. What was it? According to Google. Similarities, yeah, of course. So similarities. So the common ash and the 3 native elm tree species mountain elm, field elm, and European white elm have a lot of similarities or things in common. And this is basically the same sentence and the same structure in English. So bevorzugen sie Standorte, die gut mit Wasser und Nährstoffen versorgt sind, zum Beispiel entlang großer Flüsse, wo sie häufig in nährstoffreichen Auenwäldern zusammen mit Steheichen, Weiden, Pappeln, Erlen und vielen anderen Baum- und Straucharten wachsen. So bevorzugen sie Standorte, so prefer, bevorzugen. I think we also had that in some previous episode. You can also go watch that if you want a further explanation on that. So bevorzugen, I'm just going to say before, pull, so prefer. Sie Standorte, so prefer. They Standorte, standing places. We also had that in some previous episode. So locations, die gut mit Wasser und Nährstoffen versorgt sind. That, good or well, with water and, what was it again? Nährstoffen? Nutrients. So Nähr means to, what's it called? Nutrition? No. Nähren. Nourish. That was what I was looking for. Nourish, Stoffen, like, what's it called? Not, the other kind of stuff. Not material. Like, nourishing, not fabric, substance, yeah, matter, stuff. Not in terms of textile, was I was wanting to say. So, like, nourishing things, you could say, or substances. Versorgt, which means, we also have that in some previous episode, to be, I forgot that word. Provided, supplied, yeah, to be supplied with. So, and nutrients supplied are, so that well with water and nutrients supplied are, zum Beispiel entlang großer Flüsse, for example, along, entlang, yeah, basically means along, großer, big, genitive form, or entlang wessen, entlang wem, entlang großer Fluss. I'm not quite sure if it's genitive or dative, but yeah. So, big rivers or huge rivers, wo sie häufig in nährstoffreichen Auenwäldern zusammen mit Stieleichen, Weiden, Pappeln, Erlen und vielen anderen Baum- und Straucharten wachsen. So, where they many times, wo sie häufig, where they, or often, in nutrient rich, Nährstoff, we have that here, reichen means rich, so nutrient rich, or enriched, or whatever. Auenwäldern, which I'm not quite sure how to translate that, something woods forests. Auenwald, yeah. Floodplain forest. I'm not even quite sure. I think it has something to do with water. Yeah, that seems to be also a city. And, here. Auwald, so that Auenwald is probably the more colloquial, like more used form, but in general it seems to be Auwald. And it says, that bezeichnet eine natürliche Pflanzengesellschaft entlang von Bächen und Flüssen, siehe auch Flussaue. Azonale Waldgesellschaften, die von Überschwemmungen und hohen Grundwasserpegeln stark beeinflusst werden. Damit lässt sich Auwald abgrenzen von permanent nassem, sumpfigen Bruchwald sowie vom zuweilen trocken fallenden Sumpfwald. Yeah, that is probably pretty complicated to you if you don't know too much of German, but that just means that it is a, what's it called, Ansammlung, collection, rather accumulation of trees along water-rich areas like like rivers or smaller rivers. And yeah, they prefer one dedicated zone for them, basically. And yeah, as always, Wikipedia articles are pretty complicated to read if you think you already understand a lot of the language, because in my language learning journey, just as a quick side note, that I just noticed that even though I thought I was good in this language, I still did not really understand a lot of these Wikipedia articles, but because they are always written in, especially these in terms of like science kind of, in very advanced language, and in German it's probably extra hard because German has a lot of words and a lot of different, more complicated, more advanced language. So don't be like, what's it called? There was another word. Like, don't be disencouraged or something, but just because you don't understand this article, it's just because these words, I mean, just even for a native speaker, I really have to think about what it says, because it's kind of like it has a scientific tone to it, very, very much written in advanced language. So just as a quick side note. So, and here we were. Versorgt sind zum Beispiel entlang großer Flüsse, along big rivers, which is what this Auwald explanation from Wikipedia just explained to us. Wo sie häufig in nährstoffreichen Auenwäldern, so yeah, these kinds of forests along water sources, you could say. Together, mit Stieleichen, with these oaks, I forgot the name of them, we had them in the series. English oaks, Weiden, probably willow trees. Pappeln, poplar, I think. Erlen, which were, didn't we have Alder? Yeah, I think we had them. Und vielen anderen Baum- und Straucharten wachsen. I don't know why I say wachsen the entire time. Anyways. And many other tree and bush, Straucharten. Yeah, it's kind of bush. Shrub species wachsen, grow. So bevorzugen sie Standorte, die gut mit Wasser und Nährstoffen versorgt sind, zum Beispiel entlang großer Flüsse, wo sie häufig in nährstoffreichen Auenwäldern zusammen mit Stieleichen, Weiden, Pappeln, Erlen und vielen anderen Baum- und Straucharten wachsen. Which means, so prefer they locations that well or good with water and nutrients are being like supplied with. To the example, or for example, along big rivers where they often in nutrient-rich, Auenwäldern? Floodplain forests, together with English oaks, willows, poplars, alders or something. Alders and many other tree and shrub species grow, so Google will probably do a better job at it than me, because it always takes a long time to do it in the entire sentence structure. So they prefer locations that are well supplied with water and nutrients, for example, along large rivers where they often grow in nutrient-rich floodplain forests, together with pedunculate oaks, willows, poplars, alders, and many other tree and shrub species. And by the way, another side note, there you see a good example of when Google tells you something as a word translation, but in the entire context it is a totally different word. No, I mean not totally, but for example here we had English oak, I think it said, and in general it seems to be translated, at least in this context, pedunculate oaks. But yeah, English oaks, and it said pedunculate oak. So, and sie sind auch an saisonale Überschwemmungen angepasst. They are also at, or to, but in this case at, saisonale or saisonale, I don't know how to pronounce that in German because it derives from French, of course, from saison, as the word season in English probably does. So seasonal, I think. Überschwemmungen, over, schwemmen. How do I translate that? Schwemmen, I mean that is just flooding probably. Yeah, flood. So schwemmen, by the way, there's this word schwimmen in German, which means to float. Oh yeah, to swim, just in comparison to the from the schwemmen, it means to float on top of the water, and so to swim. And schwemmen means, of course, for the water to move purposefully, or not so purposefully, but like for the water to do something, for the comparison of schwemmen and schwimmen. And überschwemmen means to flood or flood over something. So Überschwemmungen means, basically, overflow of water, so flooding. Angepasst, which means, what was it called again? To be, I forgot, like adjusted, yeah. So, adapted, adjusted. So they are also at seasonal floodings adjusted. They are also adjusted to seasonal floodings. Außerdem haben sie ein außergewöhnliches Holz, das bei entsprechender Qualität hohe Preise erzielen kann. Außerdem, moreover, probably, or besides, other, furthermore, just that. Besides that, have sie, they, a außergewöhnliches, out of the ordinary. You could say gewöhnlich means ordinary, normal, because it derives from the word gewohnt sein, gewöhnen. So be used to something. This derives, by the way, from the word wohnen, which means to live. In English there is not a direct translation to that, but it just means to live, reside in a house, which in German means wohnen. In French, for example, it means habiter, I think, or something. And but in English there is not a direct translation for that. So außergewöhnlich, out of the ordinary. Gewöhnlich, just means normal, I think. Ordinary, usually, usual. And gewöhnt was something I wanted to show you. Gewöhnlich, gewöhnt, be used to something. Habit, and here, very interesting, we have this word. Gewöhnt is not really a word, but just to show you, habit. And there you see again, which was funnily something I just showed you, that in French, this living inside of a house, so wohnen in German means in French habiter, and here you see this habit, which you see where it comes from French, and you see the dots kind of always connect. So out of the ordinary. Holz, which means wood. I think also, what's it called? Lumber or something? Oh, there's another word. No, timber, lumber, Das bei entsprechender Qualität hohe Preise erzielen kann. That as entsprechender derives from the word sprechen, which means to speak. Entsprechen, which means to meet someone's expectations, basically. So, if something is given, if this quality is given, entsprechender Qualität, hohe Preise erzielen kann, so that at like a distinct quality, high prices, score can. So, moreover, have they a, what is it called? Special, extraordinary, this just also says that, extra and ordinary. would, that, by or at a distinct, I would say, corresponding, quality, high prices, reach, can. So, what does Google say? Also, I would say, just I'm not looking. Also, they have a extraordinary word that adds a distinct quality. Thus, if a distinct quality is reached, can reach high prices. Furthermore, they have an exceptional word which, if of sufficient quality, can fetch high prices. So yeah, kind of the same sentence, but mine is of course more simple. So, just gonna drink something. Oh god, always hitting this kind of microphone thing. I hope it's not too annoying. Maybe I'm gonna just put it off because it can be annoying. Wait a second. Sorry for the break. So, yeah. So, and another sip of water. So, where were we? Here. Leider haben sie auch eine weitere Gemeinsamkeit. Sie werden von Pilzarten heimgesucht, die aus Südostasien eingeschleppt wurden. Leider, unfortunately, this derives from the word leid, which means pain, suffering, generally, it means suffering. Leider, unfortunately, have, sie, they. Why is it written in uppercase? Because this is the normal cases, this is the formal form of saying you. In English you always say you. In German you say du when you're with friends or people you know, and sie when you're with people you kind of show respect, like other people, other random people, and yeah, just, or for example your teachers, or you know, like people you're not necessarily like friends with, like not on the same level, you could say. So sie in general would be written with a lowercase s, and I don't know why it's written here with an uppercase s, because that is just kind of weird. So maybe we're gonna correct that. Of course we're gonna do something. Wait, let me just see, can I do that? Yeah, I can. And here's of course a dot also missing, where I can edit that kind of. So, leider haben sie auch eine weitere Gemeinsamkeit. Sie werden von Pilzarten heimgesucht. So, unfortunately have they also eine weitere, another Gemeinsamkeit, similarity, thing in common. Sie werden von Pilzarten heimgesucht. They are being, so passive form, from or of Pilzarten, which means mushroom types, but you would rather say fungus in English probably, because it doesn't relate to the mushroom that is a kind of a nice mushroom. I hope you understand what I mean, like this just mushroom you can eat, but the fungus rather, I guess. So fungus types. Heimgesucht. This another term, we have this heim here, which means home, or is an older version of home, or the Bavarian version of it. I mean, home, house, yeah, probably rather an older version of house, but it rather means home, kind of. Heimgesucht. So, gesucht means seeked, searched, looked up. This derives from the word suchen. Yeah, so seek, look. And, so gesucht means looked up, searched for, you know. And heimgesucht means searched for, like literally it means searched for at home, which means to be haunted. So, I mean, you can kind of connect the dots there, I guess. So, to be haunted by that, die aus Südostasien eingeschleppt wurden. That from Southeast Asia, Süd, South, Ost, East, Asien, Asia, eingeschleppt wurden. So being, how do I say that? Being schleppen. Schleppen means to, I don't know how to translate that. To tow, drag, haul. I mean, to, I think you probably understand if you're a native English speaker what to tow, the tow. Yeah, probably not gonna hear that because it's a different audio. What to tow means, so it means to, schleppen, but just to, I don't know, drag something, like take something up, I don't know, heave something maybe, carry, of course, this is what I was wanting to say, to carry something probably heavily, like to carry something heavy, yeah, I don't know. And eingeschleppt, which means to be carried inside, so ein basically means in this case, geschleppt, be carried, or having been carried. So having been carried, basically having been carried inside is what these two words mean. So be carried, having been. Wurden is the passive form which you need to put there to say that it's passive, basically. So unfortunately, have they also one further or another similarity thing in common? They are being of fungus types haunted that from Southeast Asia, like carried inside were, you could say, or being, I don't know, transmitted. So unfortunately, they also have another similarity. They are being haunted by fungus types that have been carried there from Southeast Asia. Es ist sogar die Rede von Ulmen und Eschensterben. Es ist sogar die Rede, which means it is even the talking, you could say. And this is something also you have to kind of, how do I say that? To kind of mark in your mind, like to, not to memorize, to, take notice of that. This is a saying. Es ist die Rede. This is a very common saying in German. Es ist die Rede von blah blah blah. Von. So, Google says it is about, but it just means, they are talking, basically it means they are talking about this and that. For example, I could say, in diesem Artikel ist die Rede von Bäumen. So you could say, in this article they talk about trees. This article is about trees. Or as I just said, es ist die Rede. I think you can also say, es ist die Rede davon, neue Bäume anzupflanzen, for example. The plan is to plant new trees. I don't know why Google always just recommends corrections which just aren't correct. Es ist die Rede davon, neue Bäume anpflanzen. What the heck is that? Google, do better. So, es ist die Rede davon, neue Bäume anzupflanzen. The plan is to plant new trees. And I think you kind of get what I mean. This just says, it just talks about, it talks about, the plan is, es ist die Rede davon. It kind of also has a planning aspect, as this just showed, or Es ist die Rede, yeah, just talking about, is about, these kinds of things. So, es ist sogar die Rede vom Ulmen und Eschensterben. It is even the talking from, or of in this case, elm and ash tree dying, you could say. And I'm just gonna Google translate that. I don't know how to translate that better because there is probably a better way to translate that. No. This I wanted to. Dutch elm and ash dieback. Another example of where Google said elm tree and this is Dutch elm, or it just specified that, I don't know. But there you just see it's never kind of correct unless you know, so that's why it just is worth learning a language, because the translator is in the end still program. So, the talking from Dutch elm and ash tree dieback, something like that. So, people even talk about the ash tree and Dutch elm, Dutch elm and ash tree dieback. And what does Google say about that? The way I translate that? Yeah, this is what I was wanting to say. There is even talk of elm and ash dieback. It's always just like Google always says something else. The more you give it, you can never be sure. Vom Ulmen, yeah. You can either say von Ulmen und Eschen sterben, or vom is more direct, from the basically it means, and von is off, like you would say in English. There is even talk of elm and ash dieback, and vom would be of the elm and ash dieback. So, solange keine unempfindlichen Exemplare gehandelt werden, sollte man von einer Pflanzung dieser Baumarten absehen. Solange, as long as, so long, basically it means, but just in general means as long as, keine, no, unempfindlichen, unsensitive, I think, empfindlich, this derives from the word empfinden, which means to feel, to sense, to perceive. And I think it probably in the end derives from the word finden, but I'm not quite sure. So, yeah. Find. Maybe, if I'm not incorrect, but maybe. Just maybe, this derives from the word empathy, which in German is kind of the same. Empathie and finden. Maybe. Might be a genius for that, might be not. It might not be. But, empathic finding, but I don't know. Actually, I'm just gonna look that up. Empfinden. Etymologie. Okay, no. It just has a different meaning. Entfinden, entwinden. Yeah, okay, so different kind of meanings. So emp, and finding, but so my guess with the emp as empathetic has a different meaning, or apparently derives from a different kind of just like development of the word, but it apparently does derive from the word finding. So yeah, because normally I would have guessed that it derives from the word finden maybe, but that doesn't make too much sense, of course. So, as long as no unsensitive, you could say, empfindlich means sensitive, unempfindlichen, keine unempfindlichen, unsensitive, I guess. Insensitive. Exemplare, examples, or ones, or what's it called? Copies, probably you could also say, but I mean, yeah, no, there's Exemplare eines Baum ist. Specimens, yeah, I'd rather say specimens. Insensitive specimens gehandelt werden, are being dealt werden, are being dealt, or dealt are being. Handeln, yeah, it can have various different meanings. It can have the meaning of be about something. For example, es handelt von, for example, in terms of like a theater or a story, es handelt von dies und das. Or handeln in terms of economy, ich handle mit Geld, ich handle mit Aktien. And gehandelt in this case, yeah, more economy, like economy-wise, so being dealt, but also gehandelt werden, so yeah, being dealt like in terms of being used, you could say, but also kind of probably economy, something like being bought and something, I don't know. Sollte man von einer Pflanzung dieser Baumarten absehen? Should one from or of, one of, so einer, one of, or one Pflanzung, so planting of this, of these, dieser Baumarten, of these tree species, plural form, absehen, so absehen, this derives from the word sehen, to see, and absehen means to basically look away from that, so it just means to like throw this thought away, you could say, to not do that. So as long as no insensitive specimens being dealt or like dealt are being, I don't know, should one from a planting of these tree species look away, you could say. So as long as no insensitive specimens, or as long as there is not being dealt with any insensitive specimens, one should throw away the thought of planting one of these tree species. And what does Google say about that? Of course, my better translator friend. As long as no robust specimens are available, one should refrain from planting these tree species. Of course, the fancy word refrain is used. And wenn Sie in Ihrem Wald aber vitale Eschen oder Ulmen haben, sollten Sie diese möglichst schonen und erhalten. If you, so you, this is actually the formal form of that, so not this, which was written in uppercase wrongly. So if you, formal form, wenn Sie in Ihrem Wald, in your, so Sie in Ihrem, you don't say Sie in deinem, that would be from the form du. Then you could also say wenn du in deinem, but this is of course talking to formally to the reader. So if you in your forest, your formal form, forest, Wald, forest, aber, but, weiter, ash trees and elm trees have, so this but in this case maybe rather means though. If you in your forest, though vital ash trees and elm trees have, sollten Sie diese möglichst schonen und erhalten. Should you, formal form, these, like, possibly, möglichst, like in the best way possible, you could say, schonen, which means to, let me have a look, to protect, yeah, to conserve maybe, to go easy on, yeah, schonen, and erhalten, and yeah, conserve basically. Erhalten, I think it just means to conserve. So if you in your forest, though vital or but vital ash trees and elm trees have, should you those possibly, or in the best way possible, can like be go easy on and be like conserve, or what was it again? Schonen. Save. I don't know. It just doesn't take care of, like, yeah, something like that. And conserve. So if you have vital ash trees and elm trees in your forest, you should go easy on them and conserve them in the best way possible. Oder as best as possible. Vielleicht bildet sich ja in Ihrem Wald eine Resistenz gegen die Pilzkrankheiten, welche zum Erhalt einer dieser Baumarten beitragen kann. Maybe forms or shapes itself bildet sich. Vielleicht bildet sich. Ja. Perhaps forms itself, yes, in your forest. Vielleicht bildet sich in Ihrem Wald eine Resistenz. A resistance or resistancy. So resistance gegen die Pilzkrankheiten, against these fungus infections, welche zum Erhalt, or illnesses, diseases, fungus, like basically it means mushroom diseases, but fungus diseases, welche zum Erhalt einer dieser Baumarten beitragen kann, which to the conservation of one of these tree species can, what was it again? Contribute. So, maybe forms itself, yes, in your forest, a resistance against these fungus infections or fungus diseases, which to the conservation of these tree species can contribute. So maybe in your forest there grows a resistance against these fungus infections, which can contribute to one of these tree species. And yeah, that was it for today from this Eschen Ulm, of course, not Eschen Ulm episode. I hope you liked it. Leave a comment, leave a like if you want to, and subscribe to the channel if you like these episodes and these videos and want to support me. And see you in the next video. Bye!